Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where we're talking about TV shows of the supernatural fantasy and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Timeless as well as the latest episode of Into the Badlands. Like always, if I talk about something you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include a time when I start to talk about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you want to hear what I say about this week's episode of Timeless, you can skip to what I had to say about this week's episode of Into the Badlands. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is this week's episode of Timeless. So in this episode, we have the team going back to 1919 in particular, where women are kind of fighting for their rights to vote for their voice. Obviously Flynn comes along. Wyatt's not too happy about that because he saw Lucy coming out of Flynn's room, and it kind of stirs up some things because it's like for him. You could make the argument, it's like, well, it's like a little bit of a jealousy thing, but also it's because it's Flynn. If it was anybody else, he'd probably still have his issues, but it wouldn't be as big a problem as it is because it's Flynn, the same dude that tried to kill them so many times last season. So that's not easy to kind of wipe out of your brain. Lucy ended up saying nothing happened between them, but I wonder how true that. I kind of get a feel maybe it didn't. Like for her, it's just kind of like a hey, he just wants to talk to me. I don't know if Flynn even looks at her that same way because, like I said, like it's a complicated situation because he's going to try and get his family back too. So I'm sure he's not going to try and get intimate with Lucy. So it seems like it might head that direction, but when you think about that, maybe it won't. But nevertheless, very interesting circumstances. Obviously, Rufus, Gia's warning last episode has got him a little rattled. He doesn't know what to do because even Gia's kind of like, yeah, maybe you can't change anything. And that, that's terrifying is like knowing what your future holds and potentially you can't change anything. Once again, the whole GFK thing makes it go like, maybe it's not possible to change timelines, So it's like no matter what happens, time always has a way of kind of course correcting itself into what is always supposed to happen. So which kind of gets Rufus in this idea that because Flynn's like, hey, don't worry, Rufus. You have to. I promise I won't kill you. Does that make you feel better? I won't kill you this trip. He's like, does that make you feel better? It's like, actually, it does because Rufus starts getting in his head. The fact of the matter is, I know when I die. It's that time travel thing. It's kind of a similar thing that happens. Like it happens with a lot of stuff. Like best example would be like on the Flash. Spoilers for season 3 of the Flash. It's season 3, so the whole Iris situation when she found out like, oh, Savitar is what kills me. I don't die until then, so I can do whatever. I don't have to fear anything. Rufus gets that same mentality because it's like, oh, Gia saw when I die, so it's no problem. He's like, yo, I'm crazy. Like, oh, yo, it's like the cops got a gun pointing at Rufus. Rufus is like, yo, Flynn, do your thing, take him down. Flynn's like, shut up, Rufus. Shut up. Rufus is like, do the thing, Flynn, do the thing. And Emma shows up and says, but then he ultimately goes like, what the hell is wrong? He's like, don't worry. Gia saw that I was alive. I'm going to die at this particular point in time, so I'm fine until then. And then Flynn's like, you idiot. You might die then, but you do realize that someone could just shoot your kneecaps. And Rufus is like, I didn't actually think about that. Just because you die at a certain point in time doesn't mean you won't get the living shit beat out of you before then. So it's like you're not 100% invincible type of thing. So, which Flynn kind of pokes fun at him about it later on because he literally gets the crap beaten out of him by a cop later on. So it's kind of like, yeah, our friend Rufus does not know the definition of invincible. So. Which, since I brought it up, it's the whole situation of Emma. I was kind of wondering about that too. I was like, why would Emma choose to help? Because it's like, oh, you were sent on this particular mission by Nicholas, but it's like, well, what are your plans? Well, it seems like her main reason for helping is because she's a lady herself, because she grew up in an abusive situation. Her dad was a drunk abuser, and her mom had a lot of courage to take her and run away. And it's like she had a much better life. She wouldn't be where she is right now if it wasn't for her mom making that sacrifice. But if women's rights aren't developed, which is kind of what Nicholas is kind of trying to dismantle, which is interesting that you're picking the ideals of a man from a time like that. I mean, let's not forget, they pulled him for World War One, so he shares a lot of that male ideals of oh yeah, women don't it's like he's not that progressive if he's trying to destroy the 19th Amendment and letting women have rights and stuff like that, so that's why Emma kind of goes against his rules. She ends up talking about oh, Andre died. I can only assume she killed Andre like she killed Sleeper Agent, because for her it's which is kind of interesting. You weren't expecting that because Emma is kind of the one that just, you seem like she was all for this plan, but even she has her certain things she won't be okay with in certain regards. So it's just kind of interesting in my head. I'm sure it interests everyone to know that that's why. I mean, it's after everything you've done, you decided you want to work with us now. It's you were friends with me. Even I love Rufus being like, you guys were my friends. And it's like, then he finds out Anthony was working with Flynn and you're working with Rittenhouse. It's like, oh my God, I suck at picking friends. But Emma did come through in the end when it was necessary. So it's kind of interesting. I am curious what it is exactly that Nicholas is saying, like, oh, I need you to do this. He ends up talking about the fact is that she's important, but maybe it's just because, like, Nicholas seems like a manipulator. Like, it seems like he can probably read into Emma. It's like, oh, Emma's just trying to fill some hole in her heart. Like, if I press the right buttons, I can... Like, because to me, it's like she's kind of getting swept up in it, but part of me is like, he comes from that same time period of like, you know, he wanted things to kind of play out a certain way. So I think he has that same mentality, not unless there was more to it than that, you know? Because it's like, I don't know, like, because they're acting like they're creating a perfect utopia, but obviously it's going to have its issues if, like, you know, he's going about destroying history in certain ways, because it's kind of like, oh, I guess you're thinking it's good at where you stand, but it's like, I mean, Rittenhouse was already based on, like, some bad, like, thoughts, you know, it's just so, you know, it's not like all things are going to be sunshine and rainbows when it comes to Rittenhouse, sure, but it's like, how can you side with someone who thinks like that? It's like, a lot of people in your organization are women. There's Carol and then there's Emma, which when you actually think about that situation, it's a little weird because that means Emma hooks up with Carol's grandfather and Lucy's great grandfather, which is just, it's got to be a little weird to think about. I'm sure Carol, the moment she finds out, she's not going to be happy. But the fact of the matter is, you can tell he's just using Emma because he sees Emma as just a tool. And I don't think it's just her, anybody in general, like that's part of Rittenhouse. He just looks at them as a means to an end to get what he wants, you know? So I don't know. You kind of feel bad for Emma, so. But like I said, it is interesting that she doesn't side with everything. It says, like I said, we're still interested to know what it was that he had planned for her to do anyway. I mean, it had to have been something that point in time too. Well, because it was like, get there and then get back because you're very too important to me. And so I was like, I don't know. That's how I view it. Maybe he actually does care about her. I highly doubt it, but we'll have to wait and see. What was interesting in this episode is, sadly, the lady Alice died. Alice Paul, the one who gives the speech, who's the reason why women kind of have the rights that they do today. She played a pivotal role in that. She did it for the rest of her life, fighting for women's rights, and sadly, she was killed. Which devastates Lucy because for Lucy, it's like she was such an important figure. And for her, it's like she was reduced to nothing. History will not say that she was important. She's not even in the cliff notes or anything because she served no purpose. Like everything she gave up, everything she sacrificed for that fight means nothing in this history. It's like, yes, it all worked out in the end, but it still sucks because for Lucy, it's like the only people who remember how things really were her, Flynn, Rufus, and Wyatt. They're the only ones that will remember the truth. And it's just kind of sad. Like, you know, I think maybe on some level it kind of gets very existential because for her it's probably like, yeah, like it could be a situation of like someone who's so crucial to history can be wiped from the books just like that. I guess it also puts in perspective just what Rittenhouse is doing, that they're destroying time in that regard. Like because of the way time works, time can in a flash just like that make you insignificant, not mean anything, undo everything that you essentially will do in the future. You know, it's kind of sad actually. Initially, Lucy was going to be the one giving a speech, but it was ended up being Grace, who is very good at what she does. Like that title of Miss Sherlock Holmes ain't for nothing. I did love that she says it's elementary, and I was like yeah. But I love the fact is that she's really good at it. Immediately the moment Wyatt and Lucy walked in, she was like, yep. It just knew their situation, knew Wyatt was a soldier, the way he carries himself. And it's just like, yo, you are super good at your job. It's like, oh, that cop won't cooperate. It's like, should I go and tell your boss that the fact is you're drinking on the job? It's like, if I went over there and checked in that drawer, what I find, he slides it closed. I'm like, she is really good. She even is the one who saved Lucy because she was the one to decide, oh, like who wants to give a vote? And it was like, oh no, that's how she figured out who the person was because it's like, oh yeah, the note was written by someone left-handed and it's like, oh, this and that, like using deductive reasoning. And she shows up. I was like, the moment the gun did fire, I was like, what the hell was up with that? And it's like, she showed up with the bullets. I'm like, yo, she's so fucking dope. I mean, obviously she has a very different opinion from Lucy, and even Wyatt was kind of like, yeah, everyone's kind of entitled to their opinion. Because for her, it's like, she thinks women will get respect by earning it, not just by like begging and just like all this like marching and speeching, she's like, oh, that won't solve anything. You basically, in her mind, is like, you have to play ball, prove yourself, and then men will stop looking at you. Which is like, no, that's not necessarily the case. Just because people are stuck in their own ways, even if you prove yourself, who's this, because even in her current condition, like, she is someone that the police go to on a regular for help. But they will never acknowledge her. She will never be recognized as a police officer, even though she's better than anyone in there. We saw that already in just this bit of an episode, how fucking skilled she is. And she'll never get the I mean, in an alternate timeline, she does, because she's the one who ended up giving the speech instead of Lucy, because, because Lucy kind of said something that kind of sparked it inside of her. It's because she made her, like, after seeing everything going down, it kind of, sparked it inside of her, because she's like, people who choose not to say anything like herself are just as culpable as people who just kind of shut women down. It's like, unless I stand up and say what it needed to be said, that they, kind of giving the speech that she did, which was very powerful. And also, like, the fact is, it's like, oh, they didn't arrest you? She's like, yeah, because they know if they arrest me that they won't have help from me in the future, which they know they're going to need. So, yeah. It's a very calculated move on their part. So I also love that she was like, what are you two? You two are just kind of strange. You're from Canada. And they're like, nope. She's like, I'll figure it out. Give me time. It's like, maybe she will. I don't know. Because she's a very logical person, so I doubt you jump to the conclusion of, you're from a different time period. It's like, so ultimately, it's very interesting. It is one of those things, it's kind of sad, because it's like, they'll never meet these characters again, because of the whole aspect of, like, never going back to a time period you've already been to. So there's these characters and these stories that we'll never get back to, just because it would involve going to a time period that you can't go back to anymore, because it'd be overlapping with your own timeline. So it's just kind of interesting and sad that you have all these one-off characters. But a big part of this, too, was about the whole situation of Wyatt having such a problem with the whole Flynn situation. He even confronts Lucy about it. But for Lucy, it's like, it's not fair. Like, the fact of the matter is, I'm the one that's hurt from this, and you act like you're the one that is victim in this. Which, yes, Wyatt's situation kind of sucks, because he does care about Lucy, but also, like, Jessica is his wife. But the whole problem with that situation is, like, it's not as rough. You still have someone, when it's all said and done. Lucy gets to walk away with a broken heart, and she gets to see you be with someone else. Like, that's the sucky thing, And for her, it's like, we can't live in the past. You have Jessica back, and it's just, I have to accept things as they are, and so do you. It's like, they're going to try and still be friends. Hey, we kick ass and save time and save the world. But it's like, it still doesn't change the fact that what happened between them is that there was that spark, and no matter how much distance they put between each other, that doesn't erase that spark, so it's just sad, the circumstances they find themselves in. And we also have Rufus and Gia deciding, like, because after helping, Mason figure things out with what he's trying to put together. She's like, you started something that you didn't know you were actually going to be able to finish. Like, yeah, he's like, some of the greatest battles are the losing battles, like kind of those uphill battles. You just got to keep going. That's all you can do. And I think in Gia's case, that kind of sparked her too, to be like, yeah, realizing the situation with Rufus, like obviously he apologizes later, but she also understands, like, yeah, it's not the easiest thing to kind of find out, like, oh, this is when you die. And so together they're going to try and find a way. Maybe there is changing fate. Maybe there is no fate. Maybe our destinies are in our own hands, that we can in fact shape our future. Like I said, like, her visions aren't 100% clear. They're kind of vague and kind of left open to interpretation in some cases. So who's to say that Rufus was just faking being dead, and that just kind of plays into the vision? So what's kind of interesting too is, so far, maybe it's just because she has a limited like pull with her abilities, but it's always one vision at a time. She doesn't see beyond that. So maybe because she doesn't have full control of her abilities. I mean, it's just kind of interesting that it comes to her in bits and pieces like this, and these specific events. Why? Once again, we still don't even know why it is specifically Rufus. Like I said, maybe something kind of got jangled up when last season when she was in the time machine with them, so, and something happened between her and Rufus's, like some science stuff, particles, atoms, molecules, blah 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 blah, sciencey stuff, so. And there's also something else we walked away from this episode too. Like, one of the files they were able to pull up showed an image of Jessica. The only people who saw it though were Agent Christopher and Mason, which she wants to keep secret. So it's like, what does that mean? Does that mean Jessica is? Because it's like I said, it's just kind of interesting because even Emma kind of threw it in his face. It's like, oh, look, your dead wife's back alive again. You sure you're right. It's like they had a part to play in it. It's like, there's no way they did that by accident. Like I said, I kind of get the inkling feeling like either that's why he couldn't find Jessica, because maybe Jessica wasn't in his timeline because when they went back to quote unquote save her, like, I mean, she was actually alive the entire time. They just faked her death. Well, I don't know. I'd assume Wyatt, was the one that like, yep, that's my wife. But I mean, who's to say maybe he never actually did? Because I mean, I assume you have to in those situations. I mean, we don't really know much about Jessica's family. That never comes up. So maybe they're, like the whole identifying the body situation. But it's like, who's to say Jessica wasn't off time traveling this entire time, that she's secretly been working with Rittenhouse this entire time? I mean, no, because she couldn't be off time traveling. I mean, she could have just been hidden away and she just pops up one day and it's like, hey, I mean, who's to say? Well, no, now to take it back. It's like, well, who's to say? Because they did go back to that time and maybe like they recruited her back then. And it's like, oh, she's been working with Rittenhouse subsequently since. But obviously it seems like, oh, they just popped in and popped back out. But it's like, oh, like, with a time machine, it could be any amount of time has passed. They did kind of put her through the ringer and she kind of proved herself. Maybe she was Rittenhouse all along. I don't know. Or maybe it's just to say that Jessica is important to the planet in the future, like they're going to use her in some shape or form. I'm also curious to see, there's going to have to be an episode where she goes with them, like whatever the circumstances may be. I mean, like I said, we've got 4 people, we got 4 seats now, so it could be any form of people. Hell, it could even be Agent Christopher for all we know. Like I said, we got an episode last week with Mason, so who's to say? I mean, Gia has a foot back in it, but I'm curious to see what would happen if Gia did go. Like, what would that do for her abilities? Would it make things better? Would it make things worse? A lot of questions we don't have answers to yet. So I'm very interested to find out what that, whole situation turns out to be, and what kind of, like I said, team ups will we see? Will it just be the 4, main ones, that being Rufus, Wyatt, Lucy, and Flynn, or are we going to get some changes up? I would assume changes, considering like the whole 4-seat situation, but ultimately we'll have to wait and see. So very interested to see what the next episode has in store for us. And now moving on to this week's episode of Into the Badlands, a lot of interesting things kind of came up in this episode. First of all, it's the group that we kind of got introduced to last episode. I'm assuming, I couldn't tell, but the lady that's leading the group, or whether it's the dude, but I think he's the pilgrim. It's also interesting too, because it didn't correlate in my head until like this episode. The boy named Castor, the one whose powers are kind of fading last episode, I was like, oh, what's up with that? And this episode is like, right, Dark ones die fast because using their ability repeatedly over and over again ends up draining their life force more and more. And that didn't correlate in my head. I completely forgot about that for a second. And then it's also right, because I thought all of them were dark ones. And it's like, well, it makes sense why those 2 in particular went on the offense last episode. I was like, okay, oh, maybe the others just aren't. It's like, no, they're the only dark ones. And they kind of make this whole journey possible. It makes you wonder, are the rest even fighters? I mean, it seems like some of them are, but probably like, it's like to kind of send this like holy message. They send those 2 out to kind of like show like, this righteous path they're on. It's almost like they are like a religious group on a pilgrimage. At first, because I was so curious, it seems like, because things kind of made me go like, wait, are they from Azra? Because last episode I was like, oh, I think they're from Azra. But then like certain things kind of make it seem like they're not from Azra, because they're like, oh, like the girl and was like, oh, telling Castor like she's not, like we made a promise that we'd go through the gates together. And it seems like they're come here to build a new Azra. It's kind of what their whole plan is. So I guess they're from Azra, but Azra is so dilapidated over the years that the city isn't like the great kingdom, the I guess metropolis that it once was, probably back in the old world. So they've come here to build a new one. Like I said, that's why I'm kind of confused, because the fact is they're like, I want to build a new Azra, made me kind of think like, oh, and the fact is they go through the gates made me think they weren't originally from Azra, that they're actually from somewhere else. But it's like, no, they are definitely from Azra. And they got Baji's signal that he sent out at the end of season 2. And I guess that was kind of like a beacon. Maybe they thought someone on this side sent them out a beacon to be like, hey, this is where you need to be. Which also implies, well, that what could eventually be the new city of Azura is somewhere in the Badlands, which also begs the question, well, where's the original city? Like, what happened to it I mean, because this whole thing is a pilgrimage of faith. It's like, oh, we asked you to follow us, leave behind your home and everything, the dead that we've left scattered over across this foreign land to us, for finding a new home. So this is all about finding, because the place they go to is a temple of Azura. So it looks like from the inside, it almost looks like a mall in a sense, because there's like little stores that they go in. So it kind of seems like it favors a mall in some shape or form. But obviously, like it's because it's interesting too, because Castor was like, yeah, well, whatever happened to the people of the old world? And the girl says the pilgrim says that they ignored the signs. It was like I said, so because it's something I recently brought up. It's like this show hasn't really ever shown really like it ever cared in the past about why the world ended the way it is. So maybe it is something we will get an answer to this season, or maybe it's something that'll always be alluded to. Maybe the answer is never important about what happened, but maybe the most important question is where they go from here. Essentially, it's kind of maybe that's the question. I don't know. What I also thought was kind of interesting too is the pilgrim was like, oh, I'm being led by blind faith. It's like, all I have is my faith. It's like, no, you're a skilled fighter and you can hear their movements. Is that really just faith? I guess I mean, I don't know, because that still seems like that's 100% you, but maybe he's kind of, I mean, because it seems like it is kind of like a propaganda thing to a certain extent, because they don't have all the answers. They are just trying to lead, like, it seems like they have the best intentions, but it does seem like they are misleading people to a certain extent, because it seemed like maybe they don't know that he's the skilled fighter that he is, and they're like, oh, like, fate took over, and it was like, oh, it's not his time to die, so it helped him fight back. But it's like, no, he's just a really skilled fighter because he was able to hear the movements against the leaves and stuff like that. So that's why I'm kind of like, that seems a little shady that you did that. It's also interesting too that he actually cares for the kids. It seems like the lady doesn't do it as much, because even she's like, oh yeah, Dark Ones, they have short lifespans. It's like, Jesus, they're kind of like your top tier warriors, and it just seems like you're uncaring. But I guess for them, it's just kind of like all they care about is the mission. So it's like, it seems like he made the mistake of getting close, and it's like, you were never supposed to do that. So it does beg the question, like, how did he get his hand? I mean, to be fair, we see that Dark Ones are kind of scattered all over the place. The whole point was like the abbots were kind of collecting and to kind of train them and stuff like that. But that doesn't mean that all of them are at the temple. There's plenty that are not temple, the monastery. So there's plenty that are scattered around the world. I guess they're just two that the pilgrim ended up finding. But even seems like even he has his like disbeliefs, because even he's like, yeah, this place isn't what I thought it would be. Because even she goes, yeah, sometimes. Because it also seems like where they come from, sacrifices are made. Because it seems like the pilgrim was a sacrifice himself, until the lady saved him. And it's like, oh yeah, saved him from being sacrificed to a false god. So it seems like a clashing of religions, because for them it seems like they are believing in like, I don't know. It's just kind of interesting. Like, I wasn't expecting this to really. I mean, it has been brought up before, like the gods and stuff like that, but it's never been like too deeply involved behind a lot of people's motivation. It's like, oh yeah, like people in the past in the show have called out to the gods and stuff like that. Be like, oh, the gods. Quinn says stuff in this like second season related to him. Maybe he did in the first season. It's been a while, so I might be blanking on it. But it seems like the gods themselves are kind of what motivate this group. Like I said, they seem like a very heavily religious group. So we still don't know 100% of what their circumstances are. So maybe that stuff will kind of get filled in on the details as the season progresses. It seems like they're going to be a force to be reckoned with. It's interesting because it's not like they have a big army. It's just like these people that's with them. Like, it's not like a huge group. I mean, to be fair, they probably lost so many along this pilgrimage and stuff like that. But it was pretty brutal, like, what they were doing. Because I thought she was going to be sacrificed. It is a sacrifice to an extent, but I guess because it's interesting because she ends up being pulled up by those hooks. What I'm curious about is she has these marks on her, like her front. So what I'm curious about is, has she done this before? Because he was like, forgive me. And she's like, always. So does that mean that they've done this before, except now he's using her back instead of her front? Maybe that's what that's implying. Maybe not. I don't know. Maybe this is the first time, cutting into her skin so that he can hook them like that was pretty brutal. But it's meant to put her in a position where she can kind of connect with everything. I guess she's a seer is kind of what her whole thing is, because she's like, I can see everything, which I'm like, part of me is like, I don't know, man. The fact that they didn't show us seeing her, like we just saw her looking and saying she saw everything. It's like, maybe she's kind of just a crazy lady, you know? So I don't know. That's still kind of a development kind of all on its own. And it's kind of interesting because this is our first time ever really getting a good look at Azra, because we saw it through those little, what are those things called? They're not viewfind. I forgot what those little things are that you can click and see different things. But you saw different places like the Eiffel Tower and the Statue of Liberty, stuff like that. And then you saw Azra. So Azra was kind of like a metropolis or something. Where exactly, I don't know. Maybe someone who's watching the show could easily be like, oh, that's obviously with the structure of the buildings, location, it's got to be insert place, you know. But for me, it just looks like you know, kind of a metropolitan, well, a big city or metropolitan area, like. Why get all caught up in the details? Nevertheless, it's just kind of interesting because it does beg the question. I mean, it has been a 6-month pilgrimage when you think about it, because that's when Baji sent out the message at the end of season 2. So I guess whatever they were receiving from, there was no way to kind of bounce it back. So, or maybe for them, it's not important. All that was, like I said, was just a signal to be like, hey, come here. So. A lot of stuff also went down in this episode. We have Moon stepping up as Minerva's regent, obviously, got the outfit and everything. And she hooked him up with that new hand, which is pretty badass. It kind of reminds me of the gauntlet from a knight's armor. That's kind of what it looked like to me. I was like, that's actually pretty badass looking. It kind of sucks he kept that hook thing for like one episode, and now he's got this. I mean, there was that thing he had as a replacement. He had that for one episode, and now he's immediately got an upgrade, so that's interesting. I did like that fight between him and MK, which I was like, yo, MK handling himself. Like, MK's so punk when it comes to fighting. I think that's like the first time we've seen MK like go all out in a fight, like, in a while. Like, potentially, I don't know, like he's fought seriously in the past, but it's like, I feel like this is the first time we've ever seen MK go kind of all out in a while, so that was kind of nice to see. But Moon being as good as he is, he was able to block with just that thing. But I think even MK gave him a little run for his money, but he immediately was like, oh, where'd you learn how to fight? He's like, from the best clipper around. He's like, Sonny? And he's like, yeah. And like MK kind of taunts him like, yeah, he's the one that cut off your hand, isn't it? And you can tell that pissed off Moon, because for him, it's just because it's a reminder of it's not just that Sonny cut off his hand. It's the fact is that Sonny left him without honor, essentially. It's like, you were supposed to give me an honorable death, or I was supposed to gain honor by killing you. But the fact is, you left me in this state. It makes, you know, it's a pride thing as a warrior. So he kind of got super pissed off at MK about that. So that was kind of interesting. But I also like the fact is that, like, you know, Minerva sent him to get Baji, and he was just like, oh, that dude? And she's like, is that going to be a problem bringing him back alive? And he's like, no, it's not. Which is like, yeah, you kind of want to do something to Baji, don't you? Because it was Baji that kind of interrupted your fight with Sonny. And also, more so than anything, it was Baji that actually took your hand. So probably if it was during a fight with Sonny, you'd probably be a little less pissed about it. But it's because it wasn't even Sonny that cut off your hand. It was Baji that I think really pisses him off even more. So. Also, what's kind of interesting too is Minerva asked for the Iron Rabbit's head, which I guess. It's also interesting, too, because it didn't seem like Odessa was there with her. It seemed like she was there during, like, obviously when they stole the truck last episode, but I guess she's off somewhere else. Like I said, I don't know, like, how much are part of their group or whether it's just them by themselves. Like I said, I could have sworn there was a third one, but maybe that's just my imagination. But it seems like Minerva potentially doesn't know that it's Tilda, because she was like, yeah, give me the Iron Rabbit's head for stealing from me. I'm curious, like, would her opinion change? Because obviously her and Tilda are not on the best of terms. Like, Tilda's still a sore spot for her, because it's like, you know, MK brought that up last episode. Minerva didn't really like that. So I'm curious, what would Minerva's reaction be when the time came and it's like, oh, you find out that Tilda is the one, so what would you do? Through all that, it is kind of interesting because Minerva's like, because MK's like, why do you need me? Just get your own powers back. But it's like, no, the master took my powers, but you still got yours. They're just buried somewhere deep inside. So, which we see MK kind of getting high this episode. Like, I was wondering, was there a purpose to that? I guess that's just kind of numb himself. Or has it the long run been like he's been doing drugs over and over again just because, has he always been trying to itch closer to death? Or was it just these circumstances that he was just kind of like, I want to die? But it kind of put him in his state, I guess that state between life and death kind of brought him inside of himself. Maybe that's kind of what the whole master situation actually did, but MK never understood it on that level to know that that's what that was all about. Nevertheless, he ends up encountering his Dark One self, and he's like, yeah, the master manipulated your memories, which I guess because of MK's gift being so strong, she needed him under her control. So she manipulated his memories to make him think that he did that, because it's the only way she could make because I guess she figured if MK thought that he's the one that ended up killing his mom, which he wasn't, that would ultimately push him to kind of push his ability to it. Like I figured, like him losing his ability is all psychological. Like because of the whole thought of him killing his own mom, it made him scared of his abilities, so he subconsciously suppressed his own power without her having to really do anything, aside from manipulate him. But the moment I saw the sword go through his mom, I was like, oh, please don't tell me it's who I think it is. And lo and behold, when you saw those people dressed up in red, I'm like, those are Quinn's Clippers. Don't tell me. And it is. Sonny's the one that killed MK's mom, which is such a complicated thing on so many levels, because it's like, Sonny's like the only family like MK has left. It's like, yeah, he thinks of him as a friend, as a family, done so much for Sonny, just like Sonny's done so much for him. But it's like now the person that was a friend that you consider family, you find out he murdered the last of your family. And it's like, because that sucks, because it's like, like Sonny has changed. That was Sonny back then. Like this is the Sonny that MK first met at the beginning of the series, not the Sonny that stands before him now. But for MK, it might not matter. I mean, sure, like the fact of the matter is, no matter what the circumstances may have been, he might not be the same person. He's still the one that killed his mom. And we see at the very end, like MK's Dark One powers kind of return. So that might be something we see him, like he might side with Minerva only so that he could go after Sonny himself, which you also have the whole situation about Moon going after Sonny. So we might actually see them working together. It's because both of them want a piece of Sonny. So we might see, I mean, because it's also going to work in Minerva's favor, because she needs someone on the battlefield, because she's losing kind of like, she might not be losing the war, but she's losing a lot of people, especially because it's something that Lydia kind of brings up later on. It's like refugees aren't coming to you like they used to. Season 2, refugees and people were running away to you. They're afraid to come to you now because they know they'll just end up on the front lines of the battlefield, that you don't care about them. So... But, to make sure that he gets his revenge against Sonny, that, I don't know. I'm curious to see what happens to MK. It might be the Dark One side of him that kind of takes over more, so he might not even be in control in that regard anymore. Like, he might let that kind of addiction to his powers, that might be what ends up pulling him forward, Whereas, like, he kind of made drugs his addiction, maybe eventually his, like, Dark One abilities, I don't know. We'll ultimately kind of have to wait and see. And that was kind of an interesting thing when it came to Lydia. For one, knowing Nathaniel, but then I'm like, well, to be fair, she was around the time Nathaniel was Minerva's husband's, or her late husband's regent all those years ago. It's interesting, too, because he's like, yeah, he offered her a way out, which I'm sure at where she is now, Lydia would give anything to have run away when she had that chance. But it's like, she was scared. She didn't want to give up the position that she was in. She was afraid of losing it all. But I'm sure if she had the chance to do it over again, she would. I don't know whether he was implying, like, in a lover sense, like, oh, we were lovers type of thing. I would assume. I mean, why would the regent of someone else be like, oh, yeah, run away with me type of thing? So I feel like that has to be like a lover's thing. But, I love that Lydia does not like hold out to like, Minerva's BS, because it's like, yeah, I see through what you want. It's like, oh, okay, but you can run the poppy fields, just give me Iron Rabbit. And I'm wondering will Lydia do that? Because if it's for the sake of her people, I don't know. Because Lydia's been in that situation where she's continued to try to do the right thing, go down the right path. So I don't know if she's going to be willing to try and sacrifice Tilda, especially because she knows, well, maybe she might do it if she thinks that Tilda will be safe, because like Minerva won't actually kill you. She might lock you up. It's like, but, sacrificing one for many, because it's also like Tilda kind of brought this upon herself by doing what she did, but, because she went after a specific cargo, and that was Baji, so. But like I said, Lydia did bring up good points of like, Minerva wants to pretend like she's like, oh, she's doing this, she's trying to create this perfect world, like, oh, she's just got to win this war and everything. It's that situation of like, no, it is that situation of you aren't the person that you were before. All your principles and stuff are gone now. It's like, you let all that kind of slide because power kind of became your obsession. Kind of almost in the situation, it's like, it kind of makes you no different than the barons and the system that you want to fight so much, this oppressing system. It's like you feeding into it. That very system is what keeps you in power. And I don't know. Like I said, it is that situation of you have to crack a few eggs to make some omelet type of that metaphor. You know, it's like the ends justify the means in her mind, but it's like when it's all said and done, will you be able to say that for sure? You know, so. And hence why she probably needs MK and his powers. But it's definitely going to be interesting to see ultimately when it's all said and done what Lydia decides to do. And kind of on the other side of things, we do have Sunny and Baji. They end up learning from Lydia that there was a woman known as the Mad Witch. She was actually the former master at the monastery. Because apparently her dad used to hunt down dark ones for the abbots, which is kind of interesting. Has that ever did that come up before? I don't remember. Like, the question still hasn't been answered on, I mean, it's like, well, obviously Henry got, like, the Dark One abilities running your family, which does beg the question, too. That's kind of, because that is being brought up, that does mean that must mean that MK's dad, maybe his mom, I don't know, but someone in his family had to have had the ability, too, for it to be like that. So, once again, it has to be a situation of either Sonny's was taken away, or he just doesn't, like, his was kind of suppressed like MK's. It could be that, too. I don't know. Because we still don't 100% know how the master takes away abilities. Like, well, because Baji sacrificed his ability to get Minerva out. But then it's kind of like, well, last season Minerva kind of made it seem like a lot of stuff Baji said wasn't 100% true. That he kind of fabricated a lot of stuff to make himself look better. But nevertheless. This person is someone that Baji actually used to have good contact with, the Mad Witch. Was it Inkara? Just because she was the one that took a chance on him, and also she's the one that believed in the whole Azura situation, which makes him even more reluctant to go to her for help with this whole thing. But, you know, obviously Sonny's desperate because he needs help. He's willing to do whatever it takes to make sure that he's able to save Henry. But she's known as the Mad Witch because she's, well, a little mad. In her search for all this stuff connected to Azura, she kind of went a little crazy along the way. I'm sure there's a lot more to the story, but it is interesting hearing it from Baji, because Baji dedicated so much of his time and his life and belief to this, tracking down that stupid book, looking for Azura, and now it's like it turns out to be nothing. Like, so, because she's such a heavy believer in the whole Azura thing, which maybe the current master isn't. Like, I'm curious about that whole situation. Like, how did the current master become the current master, and what's her connection to the former master? Was that, like, obviously one of her pupils that stepped up to become the current master? Like, why does she know the truth behind the whole situation with Azura, and as a master she knows more but she's not willing to say anything? Or does she just think of it as a pipe dream? And like, what is her intentions when it comes to everyone? She's like, oh, we need to get your powers under control. But it's like, yeah, all you want to do is control them, but to what purpose? I'm curious if she, like, and it's something I think I brought up in the premiere too. It's like, I wonder will she pop up this season or not? I mean, especially because we're kind of talking about her a lot, but she might not bother leaving the monastery. I mean, who's to say? Like I said, 6 months has passed, so her circumstances could have changed, but ultimately we'll kind of have to wait and see. Like I said, I am very interested to see what goes down in the next episode with all of this. Could also have Tilda helping out too, but it's something that Sunny says, which I think fits where things are going to go between him and MK very well. And the fact of the matter is, because she feels sorry, because for Sunny, it's like, you were there when Minerva handed over Vale to Quinn, and she's like, I'm sorry, but even she helps him out and everything. And for him, it's like, no matter what you do, some debts, I don't know whether he said debts or deaths can't be paid, which obviously is going to be a big fade, which is kind of ironic because that's where things stand between him and MK now, potentially. So I'm also curious because Moon saw Tilda's face. Obviously, she was using a fake name, but if it gets back to Minerva, I wonder, will he kind of like end up being the one to reveal, like, oh, help her figure out that Iron Rabbit and Tilda are the same person? I don't know. Also, like I said, we would just have to wait and see. But really, that's all I want to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.